Conventional interrogation techniques often fail spectacularly, not because the subject is unbreakable, but because the human mind is remarkably adept at defending itself against direct assault, a complex biological firewall rendering brute force obsolete. The sheer, almost ludicrous irony is that bypassing these sophisticated defenses requires not advanced psychological warfare, but three deceptively simple questions, a concept so basic it feels like a trick. If you find this counterintuitive, consider hitting that subscribe button, because the truth of human vulnerability, much like this paradox, reveals itself in the most unexpected places. This fundamental flaw in our self-protective architecture, the propensity for unintentional self-disclosure, is precisely what makes us so astonishingly transparent under the right, or rather, the wrong, conditions. People erect psychological fortresses, not just against adversaries, but against uncomfortable truths about themselves, preferring the stability of their internal narrative over the chaos of genuine self-assessment. Traditional questioning, whether in a courtroom, a police station, or a difficult conversation, often triggers an immediate threat response. The amygdala screams, the prefrontal cortex locks down, and communication becomes a strategic chess match of guarded statements and carefully constructed alibis. Yet the very act of attempting to conceal, the internal struggle to maintain a facade, creates a subtle cognitive burden. This internal friction, this constant self-monitoring, is exhausting, and therein lies the crucial vulnerability. We crave resolution, even if that resolution means finally articulating the unspoken. The challenge, therefore, is never about forcing an answer, but about crafting an environment where the subject feels an internal compulsion to offer it, believing they are still in control, even as their deepest secrets begin to flow freely. The pathway to unintentional self-disclosure is paved not with threats, but with the subtle manipulation of fundamental human psychological principles, primarily cognitive dissonance and the powerful, almost instinctual drive for reciprocity. When an individual holds two conflicting beliefs or engages in behavior that contradicts their self-perception, the resulting mental discomfort, cognitive dissonance, creates an urgent need for resolution. Direct questioning merely entrenches their defensive stance, solidifying the belief they are being attacked. However, a carefully posed, non-threatening initial inquiry acts as a mild abrasive, introducing a barely perceptible crack in their cognitive armor. It doesn't ask for a confession, it invites a narrative. This initial invitation, offered with genuine or simulated empathy, triggers the principle of reciprocity. Humans are wired for social exchange. We feel an innate, often subconscious obligation to return favors, even implied ones. When someone offers understanding, an open ear, or a non-judgmental space, the subject feels a subtle pressure to reciprocate with openness. This isn't about overt manipulation. It's about leveraging the brain's hardwired social algorithms. Consider the dynamic of a casual conversation where someone asks about your day with genuine interest. You feel a mild, positive obligation to elaborate, to share more than just a monosyllabic answer. This fundamental social contract, when skillfully applied, can bypass the defensive logic of the prefrontal cortex and tap directly into the limbic system's desire for social connection and validation. The trick is to make the subject believe they are engaging in a reciprocal social interaction rather than an interrogation, thus transforming resistance into an opportunity for rapport, which in turn becomes a conduit for information. The three questions are not a magical incantation, but a meticulously structured psychological framework designed to exploit these inherent human tendencies, moving a subject from guarded defensiveness to voluntary disclosure. It's less about the specific words and more about the function and sequence of the inquiry. The first question serves to establish context and perceived empathy. It is an open-ended invitation, not a direct probe. Think, walk me through what happened from your perspective. Tell me your story. This isn't seeking facts to confirm a theory. It's inviting the individual to narrate their reality, to articulate their internal world. This validates their experience, immediately lowering their guard. People often have a strong desire to explain themselves, to be understood, to justify their actions. By offering this non-judgmental space, the questioner subtly positions themselves as an ally, or at least a neutral party, someone who wants to comprehend rather than condemn. This disarms the prefrontal cortex, which is typically primed to detect threats and formulate defenses. Instead, it activates the brain's narrative centers, encouraging the subject to access and recount events in a story-like format. This storytelling mode is crucial because it's less about factual recall and more about constructing a coherent, emotionally resonant account, which often involves accessing deeper, often unexamined motivations and feelings. The subject believes they are merely sharing their side, yet they are inadvertently laying the groundwork for deeper self-reflection and, crucially, self-incrimination. Once the initial narrative is established, the second type of question gently nudges the subject deeper into their emotional landscape, exploring their motivations and the subjective impact of events. This is not about facts, but about feelings, intentions, and the underlying drivers of behavior. Instead of, why did you do it? It becomes, how did that make you feel? Or what were you hoping to achieve when you took that action? This inquiry shifts the focus from external events to internal states, bypassing factual debates and tapping into the limbic system's emotional processing. When someone is asked about their feelings or aspirations, they are less likely to perceive it as a threat. Instead, they are prompted to engage in introspection, to articulate their inner world. This provides an opportunity for the questioner to demonstrate perceived empathy, mirroring their emotions, nodding, and offering non-judgmental affirmations. This perceived validation reinforces the subject's belief that they are in a safe space, encouraging further emotional candor. The crucial aspect here is that emotions are often intertwined with rationalizations. By inviting the subject to explore their feelings, they often begin to articulate the justifications for their actions, which frequently contain the very details they initially sought to conceal. This psychological funnel deepens, guiding the subject from simple recounting to introspective rationalization, inadvertently revealing the underlying why that drives their what. The final question in this insidious triumvirate is the most potent, designed to encourage self-correction, deeper reflection, and ultimately, self-incrimination or full disclosure. Having established context and explored emotional drivers, the subject is now in a state of cognitive openness. The third question capitalizes on this vulnerability by inviting critical self-assessment without judgment. This is not, did you lie, but if you could go back and do it again, what would you do differently? Or what was the hardest part you faced in that whole situation? This approach bypasses direct accusation, instead prompting the subject to reevaluate their actions through the lens of hindsight or struggle. When faced with what would you do differently, people are inherently inclined to identify mistakes or suboptimal choices, not necessarily to confess wrongdoing, but to demonstrate learning or regret. This provides a safe avenue for them to acknowledge flaws or inconsistencies without feeling directly accused. Similarly, asking about the hardest part invites them to articulate the obstacles, often revealing the very actions or decisions they found most challenging to conceal or justify. The genius of these questions lies in their ability to make the subject their own interrogator, to lead them to self-reflection that naturally surfaces buried truths. The irony is profound. Secrets are most effectively revealed not by extracting them, but by creating an environment where the subject is compelled to explain themselves, often to themselves first, in a search for coherence and validation. The most potent confessions aren't forced, they are volunteered, often as a side effect of trying to articulate one's own complex reality. Understanding this dynamic doesn't just grant insight into others, it offers a chilling realization about the fragile nature of our own carefully constructed narratives, a powerful tool for self-awareness that demands ethical application.